This is Sunday Skate with Scott McLaughlin, Andrew Razor Raycroft, and Bridget Prue on WEEI.
We will be touching on the Bruins a little bit, but the big story in hockey right now, obviously, is the Four Nations face-off, which has been awesome. I had high expectations for this, and it has still exceeded them. That game last night opens with 3 fights in the first 9 seconds, which, by the way, you don't get in Olympic hockey because...
No, we were talking about this on the podcast the other day. I was like, I don't think they're allowed to fight because in international hockey you can't fight. And turns out, we said, we won't know until they try. And then they came out right off the gate. I was kidding. I didn't think we would see it. But I guess there was a group chat going before the game and all premeditated, obviously, when all of it happens in the first 9 seconds. But, I want to know what that group chat looked like.
Yeah, it's the USA's version of the Bash Brothers with Matthew and Brady Tkachuk.
JT Miller.
And JT Miller as the third wheel there, apparently, in that group chat. But yeah, right off the opening faceoff, it's Matthew Tkachuk of the Florida Panthers, Brandon Hagel of the Tampa Bay Lightning, so 2 NHL rivals and now obviously national rivals, drop the gloves right off the draw. And then immediately off the next faceoff, it's Brady Tkachuk dropping with Sam Bennett, Matthew Tkachuk's NHL teammate, by the way. So you get, Ottawa, Florida there. And yeah, and then you get 7 seconds, maybe not even, of an actual shift with a shot on goal. And JT Miller just crashes into the crease like a bowling ball. And
he's like, no. What?
Yeah.
Nobody else was. He's like, no, to his own team. Just let me do this first. We had a plan.
Yeah.
You're ruining the plan. And I was under the impression that the group chat included the guys that they fought against too. Like, hey, Sam Bennett, he's in here. Like, hey, Sam, I'm gonna knock you on your butt as soon as we get out there.
But yeah, so if this was the Olympics or any other IIHF competition, World Championships, World Juniors, whatever, dropping the gloves is an automatic game misconduct. You're done for the night. And
a lot of times suspended for the next game.
Yep.
So.
But this tournament is not an IIHF tournament. It is completely NHL run. So except for a couple rule changes, which maybe we'll talk about at some point, mostly regarding overtime. But otherwise, it's NHL rules. So fighting allowed, and you get it right off the draw. So anyone who... I think if you watched the games Wednesday and Thursday, Canada, Sweden, USA, Finland, you already knew this was not the glorified all-star game that some hockey fans seem to fear that it might be. I never had that fear because when, all these guys were saying it, when they put on their country's jerseys, they treat it like the Stanley Cup playoffs. They are all in, all out. And you saw that in those first 2 games, but then you really see it in this USA-Canada game. And we knew we would. You had Sweden-Finland, another rivalry game, as the appetizer earlier in the day. But USA-Canada, it's this has been... I think this was the most anticipated, most hyped international hockey game that we've had in 9 years. Since the 2016 World Cup of Hockey. These guys have been waiting for this. Most of these guys weren't on those teams back in 2016. Obviously some were, but there's been a lot of turnover. There's a lot of NHL stars who are just now getting their first opportunity to do this. And you can tell the way that they're embracing this and just giving it everything.
Well, and we'll play some of the comments from post-game. And Matt Tkachuk said, one of his comments was, this is our time. They haven't had a chance, this generation of American players, really to play international hockey much at all. So, they're taking advantage of it. They're doing what they can to make a mark and it certainly was a memorable game on Saturday that I think everyone's going to, have that in their mind. Oh, remember that was the game that started with 3 fights? It's very uncommon, so it sticks out immediately. And you look at who is leading in it. It's both the Tkachuks, who also in the game prior each scored 2 goals. So it feels like their team, honestly. They're dragging that team with their own personality. And normally we in Boston are not talking very glowingly about these two, especially Matthew Tkachuk. But for once, we're sitting here rooting for him in a fight. I'm just sitting here rooting for him, and it's, you have to. But and obviously we're both American. We'll get our Canadian back at some point, but and we're gonna have to like rib him a little bit as when he calls in. But I want to get your impressions.
Should I have saved Freebird to just blast that right into Razor's
No,
collar?
we'll come in with the American national
I'll keep
anthem.
it ready, Scott.
We'll come in with the national anthem on that segment. So, but no, I want to get your thoughts on Charlie McAvoy and the game he had, because the Tkachuks also spoke glowingly after the game about Charlie McAvoy. He had 5 hits. He was physical. He just looked like peak McAvoy.
Yeah, he certainly helped set the tone in this game as well, emotionally, physically, in a different way, right? He didn't drop the gloves. He wasn't one of the fighters, but
Good thing.
sure, yeah, you don't need to see that, but yeah, McAvoy not really much of a fighter. Like he's done it a couple times in his career, but not much. But he's on there for Canada's first goal to make it 1-0, where it's a nice pass from Drew Doughty to Connor McDavid, and I tweeted, like, if that's anyone else, Charlie McAvoy is probably back and able to get over in time to at least seal that play off, kind of ride the guy into the corner. Unfortunately for him, it's Connor McDavid going full speed, and no one's catching him. He got about a half a step on Zach Werenski, a half a step on Charlie McAvoy. That's all he needs. He's gone. He roofs it on Connor Hellebuyck. 1-0 Canada. What does McAvoy do the next time he's out there against Connor McDavid a couple shifts later?
Nails him.
Absolutely hammers him along the boards. Just like it looked like one of the old NFL like jacked up segments. Like McDavid gets lifted off his skates, just completely stopped dead in his tracks. And later in that shift, the USA scores. Jake Gensel to tie the game 1-1.
Our guy Pretzel.
Pretzel, yeah. Bridget has for a long time called Gensel.
I'm going to tell him. I'm going to call him that today and see if he responds.
Yeah,
at practice.
By the way, the tournament does now shift to Boston today, with practices, games tomorrow, and then of course the championship game on Thursday. So yeah, Bridget and I are both heading over to practices after the show. But yeah, McAvoy has another big hit on McDavid a little bit later in the game. He knocks down Sidney Crosby behind the net at one point. I think he knocked down Brandon Hagel at one point. Like you said, 5 hits. That tied his season high. His season high with the Bruins this year was 5 in a game.
And they weren't just like flybys. They were
solid. These were hard hits. And yeah, like absolutely helped set the tone. And it really felt like that hit of McDavid was like something of a turning point, right? Like Canada has momentum, 1-0, and that was the like here's the pushback, and now we're ready to go. So
I think hitting Connor McDavid like that and Matt Tkachuk cross-checking Sidney Crosby is like the equivalent of stomping on the Canadian flag. Like those are the two Canadians that they're like, these are our Canadians, and they disrespected both of them, and en route to a win. And I don't know about you, but towards the end of the game, before the Pretzel empty net goal, I was getting nervous because this Canada team, the fact that they were held to 1 goal is so impressive. That team has some of the best goal scorers ever. And Hellebuyck really, really impressed me. I don't think either of the other goalies are seeing any time. I mean, it should be Hellebuyck the whole way.
I mean, maybe Monday night, because that's now a
you're right.
All things considered, a meaningless game for the U.S., who
they're
has
too far ahead.
Has already qualified for the championship game.
Yeah, because everybody else has 2 points. U.S. has 6. They got all the possible points up to this point, and so yeah, I guess that would be the day maybe to play someone else. But I personally think they should just play Hellebuyck the whole time.
Yeah, because you also have 2 days off before the championship on Thursday, so it's not he shouldn't really be tired. Like even if he plays Monday, yeah, that's 3 games in 5 days, but then you have 2 days to rest before the championship. So, McAvoy saw a lot of Connor McDavid in that game, not just the hits, but just in terms of matchups. He was on the ice against him a lot. And started the game on a pairing with Zach Werenski, which had basically been the USA's top pairing. And then as that game went on, you saw more of McAvoy with Noah Hanifin, local guy from Norwood, went to Boston College. And that became the pairing that they were using a lot against Connor McDavid's line. I thought
the BCBUD pair.
Yeah, and I thought Noah Hanifin had a great game as well. I was wondering after Thursday.
He made that kick save as well.
Yeah. Jacob, our producer, by the way, BC guy. Jacob, I'm not going to rub in right off the bat that BU won the Bean Pot or anything. So
You just did. And I went to UMass, so we got all Hockey East people here today.
I thought Noah Hanifin might come out of the lineup after Thursday because I thought he had a kind of shaky first game. Good thing they left him in because he was all over McDavid. His skating allowed him to kind of match him stride for stride. So, yeah, a huge game for the USA defense, slowing Canada down, and a huge game for Connor Hellebuck in net. By the way, another Hockey East product, UMass Lowell.
Yep. All three of their goalies.
He's got a sticker on the back of his helmet of the Riverhawk.
Yep. He was the first ever recipient of the Mike Richter Award, which goes to the country's best goalie back, 10 or so years ago. And
13, 14.
Yeah, so over 10 years ago then. But since then, Jeremy Swayman's gotten it as well. So two of those guys were best goalie in college when they were there. And all three of them went to Hockey East because Ottinger is a BU guy and Swayman's a Maine guy. And there's 9 Hockey East guys. I feel like this is my propaganda. I don't know if you can sense it, but I work for Hockey East, so I have a whole show about it.
No, I'm good with any and all Hockey East propaganda. By the way, Hockey East going to get 6 teams in the NCAA tournament this year, maybe, which is pretty crazy.
They have 7 inside the cut line right now, which would be the first time ever.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll get 7, but 6.
UMass is pushing right now.
Yeah. Okay, back to Four Nations. Back to just how much of a win this tournament has been for the NHL and for hockey in general.
Take it.
It's crazy. By the way, if you want tickets for that championship game Thursday, they will be taking your money because Jacob, what did you text me earlier? Is that now the get-in price?
$781 as of last night, and I'm sure that price has climbed this morning.
Yeah. Worth it.
Yeah, so if you didn't buy tickets well in advance...
Just sell your car right now, and you'll be able to make it. Scott and I say take my money jokingly. We have credentials, so we don't have to pay, which is, I feel like I am bragging, but it's great. I was so jealous of the people that I'm friends with that are other members of the media that were at that game yesterday. It was one of the worst FOMO moments that I've ever had.
Yeah, there are some perks to this job, and getting to be there for that game Thursday is gonna be one of them. So
it's essentially like you're going to a gold medal game.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So one of the pushbacks I heard on this tournament was, well, it's not the. I know what they're playing for in the Olympics. They're playing for a gold medal. Everyone wants an Olympic gold medal. Kids, you dream of the Stanley Cup, but you also dream of that. So people get that. They know what the incentive is. I heard a lot of, why does anyone care about this? What is the Four Nations face-off? What are they even playing for? What's the trophy? Bridget, I still don't know what the trophy is that the winner gets.
I've seen a picture of it. I've seen it.
I haven't.
Not super impressive. But
I haven't seen it. I don't know what it's called. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that you have the best players in the world from these 4 countries. We know there's no Russia, there's no Czech Republic. Okay, fine. Put that aside. The best players in the world from these 4 countries just giving it their all. They care. That's all that matters is they care. And I think when the players care and when they're fully invested, fans are going to care because you're going to watch and you're going to be like, this is awesome.
There's a trophy.
Bridget has pulled up a picture of the. It kind of looks like the Tri-Wizard Cup in Harry Potter.
It does. I like it. I like Harry Potter. So I don't think it has a name except for just Four Nations Face-Off Trophy. And I see people suggesting to name it after Johnny Gaudreau or
that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Team USA has incorporated the Gaudreau family into the team. Obviously, Johnny probably would have been on this team. So his dad has been around the team. Guy Gaudreau was at their practice, or at least one of their practice, probably 2 of them up in Montreal. But yeah,
I assume he'll be at the Boston venue as well.
I think so.
Yeah.
A lot to get into here. I want to hear from people on Four Nations, on what you've thought of the tournament so far. If you want to talk about the Bruins, we haven't even touched on Brad Marchand on Canada, or
I thought he was going to fight,
or Elias Lindholm on Sweden yet. So we did touch on McAvoy a little bit. You can call in about him. We will touch on the Bruins. We are, at our heart, a Bruins show, but obviously they've been on break for a week and Four Nations has taken over. So we're starting there. You can give us a call, 617-779-7937. Text us at 37937. Razor will be joining us in a little bit. I'm Scott. That's Bridget. We'll be right back after Jacob has your trending.
And this Four Nations face-off matchup is underway, and the gloves are off. Matthew Tkachuk and Brandon Hagel. Hagel from Tampa Bay, Tkachuk from Florida. Hagel skated away as he got back up, imploring the crowd to get even more vocally involved if that's possible. And this start, if you can call it that, have we even started, reminiscent of the old days.
So that was Matthew Tkachuk starting with Brandon Hagel. A few seconds later, it was brother Brady going with Sam Bennett. And then it was JT Miller and Colton Parayko.
Colin Parayko is a big boy.
He is.
He's huge.
I don't think he's usually much of a fighter, but just the size alone makes
He
him
could be. He should
an
be.
intimidating presence there.
He's huge. I mean, he killed JT Miller.
Yeah.
That was the one fight that I was like, oh, no, they did. U.S. did not win that fight.
No. But they did win the game, most importantly. 3-1. I think we heard it referenced in the call that we played from Sean McDonough, which, by the way, good to hear Sean McDonough back. He had missed a lot of time. I think they had said due to an illness, so great to hear him back. I think Sean's one of the best. But, yeah, that ended Canada in best on best international hockey with Sidney Crosby in the lineup had won 26 straight games before last night. Going all the way back to the group stage of the 2010 Olympics when the U.S. beat them. So Canada will obviously be hoping for a repeat of that because Canada did, unfortunately, win the gold medal that year on Sidney Crosby's golden goal in overtime.
I hate to say it, that was one of my favorite hockey moments.
Bridget, get out of here. Go.
I was a huge Sidney Crosby fan back then, so.
All right, well, you can move to Canada.
I will. I would. You know what? It feels like Canada here this year. It's been the coldest winter.
Well, yeah, it was a fun drive-in this morning.
Oh, my God, terrible.
Just got to go slow. But, yeah, some highways I would say were plowed better than others. Hit a couple stretches where things got a little hairy. But
should we ask Maria how it is in Watertown right now?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go to the phones. And, of course, lead off with Maria from Watertown.
Good morning and welcome back. I'm so excited. I feel like the official start of the second half of the season, having your show back on, and it is crappy in Watertown. I should be packing my golf clothes. Instead, I was outside shoveling snow, sleet, and ice this morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Maria, you're going to Florida, right?
Yes, I am. And I can't wait to get out of here.
It's a good move.
So I'm going to bring, yeah. Good. Well, not great timing because it would have been nice to catch the Four Nations games live since they're in our backyard. But I'll be watching them outside at a nice bar. So I'm content with that. But yesterday's game was loads of fun. I almost forgot how much fun it is to watch a hockey game based on the up and downs that we've been subjected to with the Bruins this season. And, Charlie McAvoy was very, very impressive in the game last night. And I think you know what my question is going to be, but in case you don't, here is my question. Where is that Charlie McAvoy when he's wearing the spoked B? Because we don't see it enough, and we need to see it more. I understand this is a different potential level of play, and, you're playing for pride and you're playing for your country, but aren't you prideful when you pull that Bruins jersey over your head and your employer is paying you over $9 million. It would be nice if you brought a little bit of that to your regular recurring game. That's all. So thanks again, and I'm looking forward to Sunday mornings.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Look, if you're the Bruins, you're hoping that this tournament jumpstarts Charlie McAvoy, and he brings us back. Because, yes, there is a level that you elevate to in a competition like this where everyone said it, like, guys are treating this like the Stanley Cup playoffs. And the counterpoint here would be you can't do that for 82 games across an NHL regular season. Like, I think Paul Maurice said this last year, maybe the year before, after the Bruins-Panthers series, with how physical those games were. He was like, you can't play this way for 82 games because guys would be dead halfway through the season. So there is an element of that where you can bring your game to a different level. You can ramp up the physicality to a different level when the games are more important. And again, that comes back to like how these guys are treating this tournament. This is more important than the NHL regular season to them. All of them across the board. But like that said, like I think yes, we all agree Charlie McAvoy has another regular season level than even what we've seen this year.
100%.
Yeah, and you hope some of that comes back. Like you hope that playing with and against the best players in the world, what I want to happen is like for that to remind Charlie McAvoy of what he can be, which is one of the most dominant defensive defensemen in the NHL. Because he's been that before. Like, this is a guy who has 2 top 5 finishes in Norris Trophy voting that were deserved. Those were not undeserved recognition. He has been that before. It's kind of been a couple years since we've really seen it. I think he's been better than some fans who, really drag him across the coals. But there is clearly another level that he can get to.
Yeah, and to me, it's not even if he brings 100% of that, but just brings some of that when he comes back to Boston. And I think, especially the physicality, I think that's something that he could add to his game a little bit more. And he has in the past. That's the thing. It's like we've seen him do it in the past, and that's why sometimes people are critical of him this season when they're not seeing it as much. And I want him to learn from Zach Werenski how to run a power play.
Yeah, that we'll see if that happens. That might. There's definitely a bigger conversation. That's probably harder to fix in season. Like ramping up the physicality, you can do that. Like that's just an effort thing. Running the power play is, there's a technique there, and there's clearly things that McAvoy still has to learn in that area. I think this entire Bruins team has to learn when it comes to running a power. Like you look at the power plays in this tournament. Or just focus on USA and Canada, just the way that they move the puck and how quickly they're entering the zone with speed, with guys on the same page. And then, like, you look at the Bruins power play when it's just over and over, like, it's one guy into the zone and other guys, like, caught standing still at the blue line. And, the puck slows down. The Bruins power play has been such an enormous issue all year. It's like they might just need the offseason reset. Like, I don't know if they're going to be able to fix that this year. But
I mean, obviously I was kind of joking, Scott, but like I didn't think he was actually going to pull out a pen and paper on the bench and like take notes, but I would encourage it. But I don't think it's actually going to happen. But yeah, you watch this power play work and you watch how they are able to use the bumper and how good Jack Eichel is at facilitating a lot of movement and passing. And even both the Tkachuks were great on the power play in that first game. So when they made the adjustments to put them together. And, yeah, it's definitely different than watching the Boston power play.
Let's go to Harry and Quincy here, another call, who has some thoughts, I think, on Canadian goalies. What's up, Harry?
Good morning. Great talk.
Thank you.
I'm enjoying Four Nations, watching it all, and I don't really care about making comparison to our players on their club teams. But yeah, what happened in Montreal, Canadians in general, goaltending. I know, like I said, Ben is saying yes, he's a Stanley Cup winning goalie, but I just don't see it. He let them down last night, which I'm happy for. I'm a U.S. guy. But anyways, I figured I'd hang up and listen. Where's the Bordeaux, the Pures, the Roas, for crying out loud. Anyways, you guys keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry.
Yeah,
My dad
Harry.
said the same thing, by the way. My dad was like, Binnington, this is their top guy. And obviously he did win a Stanley Cup against the Bruins, so we know how good he was that year. But he's not as good as Hellebuck, and he's no one's as good as Hellebuck right now. But yeah, Binnington being their best goalie and the one that they've been going to and probably will continue to go to. And the other goalies are Aiden Hill and Sam Montembeault from Vegas and Montreal. It's a clear advantage for Team USA in net with the three goalies that they have. And we were talking about this on the skate pod the other day. Not only is it in this tournament, but the goalies that are coming up for Team USA that will eventually be the next guys to take over that are in college right now and they're young, like Trey Augustine and Jacob Fowler. Those are American guys, and they're developing U.S. goalies so well that I think it's going to be the U.S.'s strength for a while.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good question to ask Razor too when we get him on, because it has been a big advantage, and on paper it certainly looked that way coming in. Now there were, as I referenced, there were some questions there where Connor Hellebuck has had some shortcomings in the Stanley Cup playoffs, especially the last 2 years. He has really struggled for Winnipeg, back-to-back first-round exits for the Jets, even after a Vezina Trophy last year. So I think he answered some of those questions. I thought he was really good. Maybe you want to save on McDavid's goal, but that's nitpicking a bit. He roofs. He's coming full speed and he roofs a backhander. That's a tough one.
Yeah, you try to stop McDavid's goal, Scott. I want to see you stop that.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, anytime it's McDavid, you go, but it's McDavid. So.
But yeah, the first U.S. goal, Jake Gensel's, it's a low angle, and he beats him 5-hole. Dylan Larkins it's a 2-on-1. It's a really good shot. Maybe you say you want to save, but that's a hard, that low blocker just inside the post off the rush that's a tough one to stop. So I don't bash Binnington as much for that. But yeah, you look at those three goalies for Canada coming into the tournament. You mentioned them, Binnington, Hill, Montembeault, and all of them had save percentages of 900 or worse this season. That's
not good.
Meanwhile, you have Hellebuck at, I think, 927, at or near the top of the league.
Anything over 920 is an elite. That's where your elite goalies fall.
Yeah, I would even say, maybe 9, because teams are scoring so much more, even 915 is really, really good now. But yeah, 900 and below is tough. That's average to slightly below average.
And even in terms of analytics as well, U.S. expected goals was only at 0.83 last night, and Canada's was at 2.56. So you could see it both with the eye test and with the analytical stats.
Yeah, Canada had the, shots were pretty even. Canada had the better chance. Hellebuck was tested more than Binnington. There were some real, high danger point blank saves that Hellebuck had to make. No pun intended, but Braden Point alone had 2 or 3 of them right in front of the net. So, it was an advantage for the U.S. And, I know in Canada, there's some second guessing of why didn't they take Logan Thompson, who's having a really good season for Washington and statistically would be their best goalie, but he's not there. So, they kind of rolled with the cup winners in Binnington and Hill, 2 guys who have won a cup, and you bank on that big game experience and didn't pay off last night. Well, we'll see. There could still be a championship game to go.
It looked like they were going to be, rolling with him. He got an assist on the McDavid goal. I don't know if you noticed that, but he had an assist last night. That's pretty rare, but he's a guy that can break the puck out pretty well for a goalie. But I think that Hellebuck he's a step ahead of the rest of the guys. And there's some good goalies on the other teams as well. And obviously Ullmark missing, or he's there, right? But he's not played.
Well, he played yesterday. So yes, Sweden has its own little goaltending. Sweden and Finland both changed goalies. So Sweden starts with Philip Gustafsson. I thought he gave up a couple tough ones. they pull him, but the coach says it's because he was sick. He said it wasn't performance-based. Ullmark comes in, so we'll see who they decide to go with against the U.S. Monday night in a game that might matter for them. Like, depending on what Canada does against Finland earlier in the day, how that game goes, Sweden might potentially already be eliminated, or they might have a must-win to get to the championship. So, big decision there, but you could see Linus Ullmark get the start against the U.S. And Finland changed goalies after the first game. They had UC Saros in there against the U.S., got lit up, obviously. U.S. wins 6-1. And then they went to Kevin Lankinen. He was really good against Sweden. Let's take another call here. Tom in Boston, I think wants to touch on Don Sweeney, who is both the Bruins general manager and Team Canada's general manager. What's up, Tom? Tom there?
Should be. All right.
All right. Well, we'll put him on hold. See if maybe go back to him. But we're gonna have Razor coming on next. You know what? Let's break a minute early here. Get more time with Razor on the other side. Call in 617-779-7937. Text us 37937. We're talking Four Nations. We're talking USA Hockey. We will get to some Bruins. I want to get kind of, how we feel about this team at the break, coming back, just 7 games till the trade deadline. Huge moment for this team and for Don Sweeney, what he decides to do. So we'll be back with Razor on the other side right after this.
Can enjoy this one tonight, and just talking in there. Other than Game 7 last year, this has been the highlight of my hockey career. So I'm just gonna enjoy it with the guys. We have such a fun group in there, and it's gonna be it's gonna be a fun plane ride tonight. And just I've talked to you about it. Just lots of laughs. So we're having a lot of fun with these guys.
Biggest moment of his hockey career. I saw his brother Brady said that this was the biggest game of his career. Obviously, he has not had the playoff experience that brother Matthew has. I'm Scott McLaughlin with Bridget Prue, and on the phone is Andrew Razor Raycroft. What's up, Razor?
Good morning, gang. How we doing? How's the first show kicking off?
I mean, we're doing great, but we are American, and I'm wondering how you are doing because, that's a big rivalry. Were you on the broadcast, by the way?
No, I will be in Boston. I'm up here at an alumni event here. So we had a watch party last night, and I watched it with many Canadians. There obviously the start was good, but the U.S. They ground them down, didn't give them a lot, and a little more somber here, even though the start of the game was awesome. And for the record, I'm American as well.
Yeah,
so you can't get the other country.
Razor, if the U.S. wins a rematch on Thursday, like you can just jump right over and just you can just leave Canada behind.
It sounds like he's already doing that.
No. I can't completely do that. My mom and dad would be very upset. But there's certainly enough reasons that the U.S. is a place of home. The rematch, that's the key. The rematch now needs to happen, and it's up to Canada to do that. They've kind of got a bit of a sneaky game tomorrow morning against Finland. It's 1:00. It's they have to travel today and come off of that loss. So they've got to figure that one out so we get to have that repeat on Thursday.
Yeah, Razor, where do you see? So U.S. wins that 3-1. Is that as simple as they got better goaltending last night, or where else did you see an advantage for the U.S.? Like, what does Canada have to improve if there is a rematch?
There isn't much there, right? It is probably as simple as, someone can make it more difficult or dig into it more and change the lines. They're talking about spreading out the McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon, and move it through the lineup. But I think you watched last night. I mean, anybody can make a play at any single time out on the ice, and that's what's so great about best on best. I think at the end of the day last night, Hellebuck got the better opportunities against him. He made the more saves. and the U.S. made 2 plays. There was a bad line change. Essentially, like the one mistake that the entire game had was one bad line change, and that's what happens best on best. Someone's going to make you pay. It's not a fourth liner who dumps it into the corner on a 2-on-1. It's Dylan Larkin who scores a bunch of goals. So I think it is as simple as that. Of course, we get to analyze it for a week, but the players are so good out on the ice that it can go either way when these guys play every night.
And we wanted to ask you, too, what you thought of the goalie depth. And, first with USA and Canada, but then also, obviously, Sweden and Finland have great goaltenders as well. But coming into the tournament, it did seem like that was an advantage for the U.S. What do you think of the guys that America has? And do you think that maybe we see someone different in the Monday game because they already clinched?
I could see them. I don't know. Hellebuck loves to play, but you could make a good case to have Ottinger play. Absolutely, he's been there. He's the second guy. You could, it's only 5 days for Hellebuck. So if you did want to mix it up, if Hellebuck felt comfortable and felt like that would be a normal NHL week for him, and 4 days isn't too long of rest for him, then yes, you would play Ottinger. Great point. The goalie depth is kind of irrelevant in a 4-game tournament. That's the good news for Canada, because certainly the U.S. is dominating in that aspect of these 2 rosters. It's a drop off, no question, in Canada, and obviously there's a lot of people asking questions why, and there's a lot of different ideas and thoughts, but certainly worldwide, the biggest gap that's been closed in hockey has been goaltending from all the other countries to Canada, and we're seeing that especially in this tournament this year.
Yeah, do you have any theories of why that? It wasn't that long ago that Canada could roll out Carey Price, Roberto Luongo, and Marc-Andre Fleury, and before that it was Martin Brodeur, and before that was Patrick Waugh.
Yeah.
Like, that Canada's always had the very best goalies in the world, and with all due respect to Jordan Binnington, Aiden Hill, and Sam Montembeault, like, this isn't the same. And there's been, even like at the World Junior level, there's been years that's been a weakness for Canada. Do you have any theories of like why developmentally that's happened?
Well, a couple. There's one where it's just the nature of life and cycles, and you do have those in hockey in different positions. Number 2, Sidney Crosby. So prior to
It's his fault.
the lockout, what's that?
It's his fault.
It is a little bit, because kids in this era grew up watching Sid. They didn't grow up watching Patrick Waugh, or they didn't grow up watching Marty Brodeur, where Carey Price did. So what happened is the best players want to score goals now. There was a time in Canada the best players wanted to be a goalie, and that cycle takes a generation to change. And there will be a great Canadian goalie coming through again at some point, but the development model is a little bit different. USA Hockey, Russia, Sweden, Finland, they all have national programs for their goaltenders, and they kind of move them through. And in those real serious development age of 17, 18, Canada has major junior, and the USA has college, which has allowed the Swaymans and the Ottingers and the Hellebucks to develop into their early 20s, where here in Canada, you play junior hockey, you're done at 20, you better go play pro hockey or you're out. So there's a developmental issue later in the teenage years here in Canada, but now that they can go and play a U.S. college, that's probably going to change, and then that could be the catalyst to find that next Hellebuck. If Hellebuck came out of as a 19-year-old and had to play pro hockey 20, he doesn't make it. He had to go to UMass Lowell to develop and get better. So that's the main reason. But on top of it, there hasn't been a Canadian goalie for this generation to look up to. They all wanted to be Sid, and now they all want to be Connor McDavid, the best athletes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, send them to Hockey East. We did a whole segment.
It's funny you mentioned that about like looking up to Sid, because I also saw, obviously, Russia's not in this tournament, and we don't know when they're going to be back in international hockey, but I saw someone tweet out like what Russia's roster could have looked like for this tournament if they were in it. And you're like, wow, that is shockingly shallow at center and loaded on the wings. And it's like the same thing. It's everyone wanted to be Ovechkin. So like that there isn't this generation of great Russian centers where like their number 2 center for this tournament would have been either Ivan Barbashev or Pavel Buchnevich behind Malkin, who's obviously, into the twilight of his career. And it's like, those guys are both better as wings anyways. Like, so I think that's kind of something similar. Razor, yeah, I don't know if you had any doubts about what the intensity level of this tournament would be. I really didn't. Like, I figure when all these guys are saying it, when they get into that national team uniform, they basically treat it like the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, they take a ton of pride in that. So it doesn't really matter what the name of the tournament is. But have you been at all surprised? Has it even exceeded your expectations? Obviously, none of us expect 3 fights in 9 seconds, but
no, that's brilliant. But I didn't. I think we talked. Like, I didn't really know what it was going to look like. I think I with you. I agree. The intensity. Like, I talked to a few of the guys, and how's everyone building up to this? And they're like, oh no, this is going to be real. This is legit, and it's going to be pretty fun. What I didn't underestimate, because I knew it was going to happen once we saw it, but we haven't seen best on best for so long. Like and the game has changed so much since 2016 that I knew it was going to blow my mind, but it's still, so to your point of being underestimating, the pace and how good these guys are, and the margin of error, which all of that encompasses ramping up the intensity. And all 4 games so far, or 6 games, 6 games, have been awesome. And they've all been good, like hard fought. No one's giving an inch. And now the U.S.-Canada game gets played, and you see the extra intensity. It's not that Finland and Sweden doesn't want it. It's just like the energy around being in the building and the excitement, and it's been great. I mean, to this point, and again, if we can find a way to get Canada-U.S. in the final again on Thursday night, I mean, the tournament's perfect.
Yeah, and I have to ask you this. Have you ever been in a group chat where they were talking about starting the game off with fighting?
Well, I certainly would have been if I lived in an era where phones were a thing, but I didn't.
You're right. Oh, my goodness. Look at me. I'm so young that
I didn't have a phone, by the way. Yeah, until I was 20
I forgot that
old,
there was a time before we could text each other.
Oh, it was such a great place. You guys will never know, but it was a wonderful place in the 90s, this world.
Yeah, so you the answer is no. So you are broadcasting. Tuukka is broadcasting as well, right, for the Finland games?
He's going to be on TNT, yeah.
Yeah. He's going to be around. I think he's just going to all the parties, but yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, no, I think he's doing some studio work for the Canada-Finland game. Yeah.
Correct. He's doing studio on Monday morning to help out the guys there with the Swedish or the Finnish pronouncements.
All right. Razor, if we can squeeze one more in here before we go to break, I do have to get a Bruins thought, because obviously they've now been off for a week, so I think we've all had a little bit of time to maybe decompress, take a step back. I'll let you put it in your own words, but have you changed anything about how you feel about this team and how they should approach the trade deadline, which is now going to be just 7 games away once they get back from this break?
So I think it's still early for them to decide what they're going to do at the break. I think 7 games is a long time. It does, it's going to go fast and it's going to be important. But if they go 6-1 or they go 1-6, it's completely different. And yes, I've continually said I still think this team's in it. I watched Charlie McAvoy play against the best players last night, and he's running everybody over and he's in everybody's face. And I think when he comes back from this, he's going to be feeling pretty good about his game. Hampus Lindholm's going to be back. Brad Marchand continues to play. He doesn't have to get fired up again to have a great 7-game break and then 25-game break here at the end of the season. So I think, listen, either way, I guess this is the best way to put the break in my position on that. Either way, there's not a lot there. Either way, it's a business kind of deal for business kind of week for the Boston Bruins, and who's signing, who isn't, and then getting assets for the guys that aren't going to sign or you don't want to sign going forward. Beyond that, there's not a lot you're going to do one way or the other, and you're really treating Hampus Lindholm as your deadline deal.
All right. Thanks a lot, Razor. We'll see you in studio next week.
Yes, gang. Good talking, and enjoy the rest of the show.
All right. Thank you.
All right. That's Andrew Raycroft. We got to hit a break here. Obviously, we went a little long, but we'll be back with hour 2 of Sunday Skate coming up next.
This is Sunday Skate with Scott McLaughlin, Andrew Razor Raycroft, and Bridget Prue on WEEI.
How would you feel if you were traded?
How would obviously it would be very weird. I would think I would feel very weird. Probably a little lost, but I don't know. I haven't really thought about it before. And I don't really think about it because it's not something that I really see happening.
And that was Brad Marchand on the What Chaos podcast with our friends DJ Bean and Pete Blackburn, getting asked about the possibility of getting traded, which I know Razor doesn't think Marchand will be traded. And right before the Bruins went on break, Emily Kaplan, during a Bruins game that was broadcast on ABC, said that she had heard from other teams that they don't expect Marchand to get traded, but it is something that could be a possibility if things go south here coming out of the break, because he is a pending unrestricted free agent. It seems like it should be pretty easy to work out a contract if both sides want to do that and make Marchand a Bruins lifer, but it hasn't gotten done yet. So as long as it's not done, I think that question has to be asked.
Yeah, and you hear his answer to what I think is like, it's really funny, DJ, just like, how would you feel if you got traded? It's like, pretty obviously, he seems like a guy that doesn't want to go anywhere. So, yeah, and you hear him say, I'd be lost. And one of the things that we've talked about on our podcast is that would the Bruins actually break that relationship and, like, not show it the respect that it deserves by doing something like that and trading him away? And he's a legend at this point. I mean, he's been part of the centennial celebrations. He's been honored in a lot of different ways with the organization as one of these guys that are just going to be in the history always. And to move him would be a slap in the face. And it would be a business move, obviously. And at the end of the day, that's what this is. But it would break the code, I guess you could say, of how you treat your players that are, he's the captain and he's been here for so long.
Yeah, that's where it would get really complicated and messy. Because if it was a situation, like use the Ray Bork comparison, where the player wants to go chase a Stanley Cup somewhere else in, the final years of his career,
which I think Sidney Crosby should do. I think it's right about time that he's got to.
He
doesn't want to.
Probably should, yeah, but he doesn't want to. And again, based on that answer that Marchand gave to What Chaos, doesn't sound like that's something he's interested in. Maybe he's just playing it close to the vest and not sharing his true feelings, because obviously if there is any chance he wants to get traded, he's not going to say that. You can't do that as the captain of the team.
I don't sense that at all, but yeah, and obviously if he gets traded, it would be to a contender this year. Right. Because nobody else, you're not trading, one of your best players to a team that's rebuilding. That would be a move with a contender that needs him, wants him for their cup run this year.
Yeah, and so the business logistics of it are he has an 8-team no trade list, so technically there are 23 teams you could trade him to without his permission, but My guess is most likely Don Sweeney and Bruins management are going to treat that like a full no trade. Like, I have a hard time imagining he'd be traded without his approval. But they have not said that. Like, we haven't gotten that declaration from Don Sweeney like the Nashville Predators did with Ryan O'Reilly. They said they are treating his contract like he has a full no trade and he would not be dealt without his approval. So again, as long as it's a little open-ended and there's questions there's going to be talk. Let's go to the phones here. Let's take Tom in Boston. What's up, Tom?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking my call and welcome back. You guys were wondering why the Canadian goalies, the best ones, the ones that they have that are best, aren't on the team, and the answer is Don Sweeney's a bad GM. The guy is stuck in the past. I don't think it's a coincidence that he picked Bennington, the guy that beat him 6 years ago. And another examples of this is he's been chasing Elias Lindholm for half a decade, a guy who's been getting worse every year since he stopped playing with two elite players. Same thing with Zadorov, a guy who was good a couple years ago, but it's now too expensive. I just think the game has maybe passed on Sweeney by, and I don't think he should be making any big decisions for the team in where they have to, decide what their future is going to be. Thanks for taking my call. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So obviously, it's Don Sweeney potentially stuck in the past. I will say, as it relates to Canada's goalies, so the roster picking in general happened months ago that they announced the final rosters. And with goaltending especially, there is that really difficult balancing act where are you taking guys with a track record, even if maybe at that time they hadn't had the greatest first month of the season? Like, now we're, 4 months into the season, and it feels like we have this big sample size this year of which goalies are performing and which ones aren't. At the time the rosters were announced in November, you're talking a month and a half. So you're doing some projecting there. And yeah, it would be fair to say that Sweeney went with guys who had track records over multiple years rather than guys who are off to a hot start, like Logan Thompson. Where it looks questionable is that some of those guys like Binnington and Adin Hill haven't really completely turned their seasons around. And Logan Thompson has stayed at a very high level. Like, he didn't come back to earth or back to previous performance. So that's on the Team Canada front. On the Bruins front, we'll get to. But, Bridget, I don't know if you had any thoughts there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think what Tom was saying is that Don Sweeney wasn't good at projecting what the future was going to be for those goalies. And as well as adding in Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, not being able to foresee what they would be with Boston this year when he was looking at them in the offseason as options. And maybe he overinflated or overvalued those guys, and maybe he did something similar with Team Canada. But I will say it should be the easiest job in the world to put together Team Canada with the amount of salary that is on that team. And it's just, most of those picks are no-brainers. And like we talked about with Razor, there weren't as good of goalie options available to them as with some of the other countries, especially the U.S. So,
and also Bruce Cassidy and Pete DeBoer. There's a report out by BR Open Ice last week that they didn't want Logan Thompson to be on Team Canada, and obviously there's a Don Sweeney angle in there somewhere too. Yeah,
and Bruce Cassidy and Pete DeBoer both coached Logan Thompson in Vegas. I believe DeBoer was there when
he
Thompson was. Obviously, Bruce Cassidy was. So maybe there's something personal there where that wasn't even really Sweeney's decision, or he's taking input from coaches. But no doubt, Logan Thompson's
fired.
Logan Thompson's having a great season in Washington, though. So bringing this around to Bruins. Look, obviously, it's the number one thing that you can criticize Don Sweeney for this season is that the Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov signings have not panned out so far. Certainly not in year one. If you're the Bruins, you're locked into those contracts, and you have to hope that it starts to look better in time. But in year one, they have not made the impact that they were hoping for. They were hoping that Elias Lindholm, no one expected him to be like one of the very high-end elite centers. Like, he's not that, and I don't think they expected that. But they thought he would be an upgrade at number one center from what they had. They thought he would be an upgrade over Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle. And he hasn't been. Pavel Zacha's definitely been better than him this season. And Lindholm and Charlie Coyle have kind of been in the same boat of not matching past production. Neither one even really putting up points like a number two center. We've seen both drop down to the third line at times. And Nikita Zadorov, it's been up and down. I think he was starting to play some better hockey before the break, but there's been plenty of down moments from him this season, and penalties have been an issue. So yeah, it hasn't transformed this team. Like, those were moves made with the playoffs in mind. They wanted a center they thought could match up better against your Alexander Barkovs and Austin Matthews of the world. They wanted a defenseman who could withstand a heavy forecheck from a team like Florida that could clear out the front of the net when guys like Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett are crashing in on your goalie. Well, the Bruins, as things stand right now, might not even be good enough to get to the playoffs. So those guys might not even get a chance to prove it in that setting. Like, you need them. Here's the thing. You can build a team with the playoffs in mind, but you have to win in the regular season. You have to get there. And this Bruins team is fighting for their life and inviting conversation about selling pieces off and not completely throwing in the towel, but essentially turning the page to next season.
Yeah, there's 2 more calls on here. Do we have time to take another one right now? Because I'm very intrigued by George's...
Yeah, I think this might spark a bigger conversation, so we do have to get a break, but George, I know you've been on for a while, so we will get to you right after this break. We are back with more Sunday Skate next.
And actually just checked Twitter, and my friend Molly Walker, who's an NHL reporter, said that her flight from Montreal to Boston got canceled because of the storm. And now I believe, she's probably not the only one that is heading from Montreal to Boston, having to drive through this storm. And it's terrible. Like, it goes, that whole drive is snow right now.
I'm envious of everyone who was at the game last night. I'm not envious of people trying to get down to Boston.
Yeah, that changes how I feel about not being there.
Yeah.
Honestly.
All right. I promised George in the car that we would get to him. So let's go to George right now. George, it says you're in the car. I hope you're staying safe out there.
Hey, good. How about you guys? Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, I had one big question. It would shake up the whole team. I would trade Pastrnak for Brady Tkachuk. Would you guys do it?
All right, thanks, George. So this is an idea that comes up every now and then. Has been popular with certain radio hosts in Boston. I almost think like whether I would do it is secondary because it's not going to happen. Like, here's the thing: that was maybe on the table when Ottawa was struggling with their rebuild. And there had been times where Brady Tkachuk seemed a bit unhappy there. When he was up for an extension, if people remember a couple years ago, that actually almost in Jeremy Swayman-esque fashion dragged into the season. I think he signed just before opening night, very similar to Swayman. And there had been rumors that he might not want to commit to Ottawa long term. Well, Ottawa's in playoff position now. Like, the worst of their rebuild is, they hope, done. They have a better team. So whether or not, look, I'd consider anything. So sure, you can throw it on the table. I just don't see why Ottawa would do that.
It's their captain. That's, Brady Tkachuk is a completely different player than Pastrnak as well. I think that's probably the main appeal when you hear people talking about it, is how tough he is and how he would be a big bad Bruin. For sure. He played at BU. There's connections to Boston for him in his past. And so that's why this name comes up. And yeah, he's an entertaining player. He's a good player. Him and Pastrnak are opposites in a lot of ways, where Pasta's European and doesn't fight and isn't, someone who's running around.
He fought in the playoffs last year.
He did. And guess who he fought? His brother, McAvoy. That's who he fought. But yeah, I don't think it. The reason why it's hard to even have the discussion is because I don't think that Brady Tkachuk, is leaving Ottawa, and I don't think the Bruins intend on having Pastrnak go anywhere either. So, and that would be such a huge trade. That's two big names. And with Pastrnak being on pace to maybe be the best goal scorer in franchise history in over 100 years, like it would be hard to see them, especially with the contract that they gave him recently, moving on from him at any point. He's probably a Bruin for life.
Yeah, and he has a full no movement clause, so he would have to agree to it, which also brings in, like, why would David Pastrnak want to get traded to Ottawa? I guess if you're exploring it, like, you can do the old kind of push him out. Like, if he's not welcome here anymore, go somewhere where he's going to feel more welcome. But, yeah, I mean, the other place, like, where this trade comes from is that I think there's this fantasy that it would just be the Bruins' way to duplicate what Florida did, right? Like, they traded a superstar.
Bring in the other Tkachuk.
They traded a star winger in Jonathan Huberdeau to get one of the Tkachuks, and then they won a Stanley Cup 2 years later. The idea is, like, you trade away your star winger, get the other Tkachuk, and you'll win a Stanley Cup 2 years later. And I just don't know that's that simple. Like, Brady Tkachuk and Matthew Tkachuk are also different players. Like, Matthew Tkachuk, I think, has more offensive skill. Brady Tkachuk is actually probably more physical and definitely more of a fighter. Like, he's actually a really good fighter. Matthew Tkachuk will do it at times, but even by his own admission is not great at it. But yeah, you're looking for like that different culture that a Tkachuk brings, and that is what they have in common. We've seen it with Team USA. Like, you throw them on the same line, and it changes that first game against Finland. They start off the second game by dropping the gloves. Like, Brady Tkachuk has been throwing big hits left and right. We talked about McAvoy and McDavid, but the hit that Brady Tkachuk threw on Drew Doughty last night on the forecheck, like, that was like one of the louder sounding hits I've heard in a while, where Doughty just gets slammed to the glass, and it's like just rattling, shaking, like loud through the television. I totally get the appeal of Brady Tkachuk. I love him as a player. I don't think that trade is happening. I don't even think it's remotely realistic, because I don't know why Ottawa would want it. I don't know that Brady Tkachuk really wants to leave there anymore, like he might have at times during the rebuild. And I certainly don't think David Pastrnak wants to leave Boston.
Yeah, and if he has this, which he does, have it in his contract, a say in what happens, where he could possibly get traded. He has a family here now, and I think he would want to stay. Do you want to take our other call from Steve?
Let's go to Steve in Fall River. Steve, what are your thoughts as it relates to the Bruins in this upcoming trade deadline?
How far are they out of the playoffs?
A point or two. They're right there.
So if they make the playoffs, they will have achieved what the President's Cup winning team achieved. They'll have a chance to lose in the first round. Why exactly? And so obviously you buy and you try to get better as much as you can. You don't do anything crazy. You don't pay more than you should, but you play the season out. I reject the fact that you can make a determination at 7 games. There's 82 games in the season. There's X amount of games left. What the 7 games after the 4-nation tournament is going to have on this season, how are you going to – I hope the Bruins aren't looking at it. Well, these next 7 games are going to determine what we're going to do for the entire season. That's called insanity. It's talk radio. It's good for talk radio. You have this other guy calling out to trade Pastrnak. Here's a rule of thumb you have. Never trade your highest scoring player, because guess what? You cannot win a playoff game unless you score a goal. Never trade your number 1 scorer. That is on Sunday. That's a commandment 1 in the NHL. So there you go. They're 1 point out from achieving what a President's Cup team did for the entire year. Here's the other thing, commandment 2. Wait for the last 2 weeks of the season. See what the health is of your team. See how the mojo's going. and make sure you're getting good goaltending, and then you will know. Only then will you know what your chances are in the playoffs. 7 games after the All-Star, after the Four Nations break, it's just a little window into the world. You don't make big decisions based on it. And that's all I have to say.
All right. Thanks a lot, Steve. So a couple things there I agree with, a couple I don't. So let's start with it. Just keeping on Pastrnak for 1 second. Generally, yeah, I agree. Like, don't trade away your best player. Like this, the Bruins have had trouble scoring goals this season. David Pastrnak has led the NHL in points since January 1st. Like, don't take that for granted. By the way, he also generally produces in the play. I know people like to rip him for his playoff performance for some reason. Generally, David Pastrnak produces. Like,
I think he saved Jim Montgomery's job last year with a goal in Game 7.
The year before, in Game 6 and 7 against Florida, he scores a go-ahead goal in the third period. Is it his fault the team couldn't hold on to the lead? Like, I don't put that on him.
No.
Either one of those would have been huge goals that would have helped the Bruins advance that year. Don't take that. Yes, don't take that for granted. Like, David Pastrnak is a special player, and no one should be in a rush to like try to get rid of him, even as appealing as Brady Tkachuk might be. Brady Tkachuk's never going to put up the point totals and goal totals that Pastrnak does. Second thing, on using these 7 games to determine your direction at the deadline. I think I do agree with that, but for a different reason. Like, for me, that's why I'm pretty committed at this point to not a full sell-off. I'm not a tear-it-down person, but a smart sell-off. Like, even Razor said, like, figure out who's not going to be here next year or who you don't want here next year and get something for them. Like, because to me, there is just nothing to cling to. I'll run through the numbers in a minute, but there's nothing to cling to through these 57 games that makes me think that this team is like some sleeping giant that's ready to emerge at some point or that still has the looks of a team that can make a deep run.
Yeah. And so my thought is, like you said and like Razor alluded to, guys that you identified, and this is something that Don Sweeney said a long time ago when he fired Jim Montgomery at that press conference. You know, we're identifying guys that want to be here, and we're going to get rid of the guys who don't seem like they want to be here. And if you have identified those people, maybe that's who you move on from at the deadline, or you move on from the guys who are on expiring contracts. Maybe they're one and the same. And that means somebody like Trent Frederick, who's in the final year of his contract, wasn't able to come to an extension yet, could be somebody that they move. And he could be a valuable player for someone in a playoff run if he can go back to being the Trent Frederick that he was last playoffs, where he was actually bringing offense and checks. And I mean, you know that the Bruins aren't going to get as much for him as they would have last year. And Coach Sacco said, hey, when Frederick scored the other day, you know, hey, he had a good game. When he's moving his legs, he's good. But it was one of those backhanded compliments, like, but he hasn't been doing that. So that's a guy that I see as an easy one to move on from, probably the right time. And you get something for him, whereas if he goes to the offseason, you lose him in free agency. You get nothing.
Yeah, and as far as potentially buying, I'll say this, and I've said on the Skate podcast, so Bridget, this will sound familiar. I'm not opposed to buying, but what I'm not doing is I'm not trading any valuable assets for a rental.
No, definitely not.
That trade should not be on the table. If you can identify someone with some term who's going to be part of your team for the next 2, 3, 4 years, that I'm open to. But no rentals, no short-term fixes, because here's some numbers I want to go through. Bridget, stop me when I get to a number that makes you think this team could go on a deep playoff run. 25th in goals scored, 24th in goals allowed, 30th on the power play, 25th on the penalty kill, 20th in team shooting percentage, 24th in team save percentage, 23rd in Corsi, which is percentage of shot attempts at 5-on-5, 22nd in expected goals percentage. Anything? Any of those jump out at you?
I was waiting. Do you have any more? Anything else? Get power play. It's all rough, and
No.
it's true, and that's
22nd in high danger chances created. Here's a good one. 14th in high danger chances allowed. That's top half of the league.
Technically, yeah. It is. Technically. I mean, they're minus 25 goal differential this year. It's not good. And they're outside of the playoffs right now, and they're in a race that is really tight. I mean, if you look at the teams that are just outside, they're tied with Columbus. They both have 60 points. Then there's the Rangers, then there's the Islanders. And even the Canadiens aren't that far out of it, and the Penguins they're both only 5 points behind the Bruins. So, and then the two teams that are in the wild card right now are Ottawa and Detroit, and they're only separated by 1 point and 2 points. So, there's a lot of teams going for that same 2 wild card spots, and I don't know. I don't know what separates the Bruins at this point from those teams. Obviously, you want to see them invest and make the right move and get someone that could be a fit here for a longer time. But I'm not sure if that's going to come to fruition. It really depends on what the market is for some of those guys, because there might be other teams in this group that I just mentioned that are targeting the same people, and maybe they're more solidly thinking buy than the Bruins are.
Yeah, I think Columbus's general manager already said they're buyers, like they're looking to add. If you're the Bruins, I think like the only thing you could cling to is that your guys have done this down the stretch. They've made the playoffs. They've gone on runs. Like they know what it takes to win this time of year as you're coming down the stretch playing big games. And maybe you look at, teams, I would say especially Detroit, Ottawa, Columbus, as teams that haven't done this, haven't even sniffed the playoffs in years. So maybe they fold under the pressure, but like that's really wishful thinking in my mind. Like, because the trade-off there is those are teams that are also going to be highly energized by being in a playoff race.
Yeah, to them, this is great that they're in the conversation.
They're pumped. Like, this is what they've been. Some of these guys have been waiting. We mentioned Brady Tkachuk. Like, this is what he's been waiting years for in Ottawa, to play meaningful games in March and April and try to make the playoffs. So, and that's gonna be the attitude on all those teams. Whereas, like, I think the Bruins, they still have to, like, mentally get over the fact that the season isn't going the way they want, because they're the ones where it feels like there's such. And a lot of it's media, fans, but like there's like this negative energy. Their coach got fired. Like that's a bad thing to happen to your team in season. So they have to combat that. Like, in addition to whether they're good enough or winning games against these other teams on the bubble, like they also have to try to find a way to be energized and excited like some of these other teams are going to be. And you can't really fake that. Like, either you are or you're not. And if you're kind of moping around, like disappointed that the season's not going the way you want, then it's not going to end the way you want either.
Yeah, and you heard Razor say you kind of just have to treat Hampus Lindholm as if he's your addition, because he's going to be coming back right around the same time as the trade deadline. And he, ironically, was added at the trade deadline a few years ago. And he's a big addition if you think, like, to get him back is big. He, at the time that he got injured, was probably your best defenseman. He was playing really well. If he comes back and he's healthy, and him and McAvoy, and say McAvoy comes out of this Four Nations and he's really feeling it, put those two together, they're locking things down, they're helping the offense, maybe they're making the power play actually do something, then you could see that they might have that last push to get into the playoffs. Like, I'm convinced that they will look a lot better with Lindholm back. And so that changes what we've been seeing over the past several months since he's been out. He's been out since November. So, I'm at least optimistic that even if they don't add at the trade deadline, that is going to be a push in and of itself to get them where they need to go to beat out those teams that I just listed, like Columbus, like Detroit, like Ottawa.
Yeah, Hampus Lindholm can definitely help, especially if he's playing the way that he was up until that injury. Now, he's coming back from a serious injury. Like, it also might take him some time to get back up to speed, and it might not even happen this season. So, like, there's also risk there in banking on that. The Bruins they've played it safe. They hope he's going to be 100% or close to it, but like he had a fractured bone in his knee. Like, it's a pretty serious injury, and there's going to be a level of being uncomfortable dealing with that.
You and I have both had knee surgeries. We know it's not fun.
No, it is not. All right, we gotta hit a break.
Wait, I want to
here.
read one text before we go to break. It said, from the 9108, it says, "What reception will Matthew Tkachuk get at TD Garden?" I think good. Like, I don't think he's gonna get booed. Do you? I mean,
I'm really interested. I think it's gonna be a little bit Marchand-esque in Montreal, which is like he's gonna do something good and get cheered, and then at some point, like, his name gets announced, he's probably going to get some boos. I think you'll hear some boos.
Yeah, but during the game, like when he's got the puck, like, when he's possessing, that's what I'm wondering if there'll be enough. I mean, there'll be some.
I think it's more of a Team USA crowd than a Bruins crowd.
I think so too. Although, that would explain the insanely high ticket prices, because these are people who are a lot of them are probably traveling for this, and unfortunately for them, traveling today, like in this terrible weather. And we're sorry if you're coming up from Florida and this is what you're dealing with. You're never going to want to come back to Boston again. But
I don't know. I'm kind of like, I think it's going to be a lot of locals. Like, I don't know if it's going to be that national or
we will find
international
out.
of a crowd. Yeah, we will. Okay, we do have to catch a break here, but you can still give us a call. We can maybe squeeze you in. 617-779-7937. Text us 37937. We will be back right after this to wrap up Sunday Skate.
When Charlie McAvoy makes a big hit like that on Sid and then McDavid, what does that do for you guys as a group?
That also is a message sending moment. Probably one of the plays of the game, they just scored a goal, the building was rocking, and Charlie comes there and he pops McDavid, like one of the hardest hits I've seen. So I thought we did a great job of handling our emotions and hitting when possible, but I thought Charlie was incredible tonight and really led that back end. But the whole 200 feet, the physicality, the offense, everything, puck movement, he was one of our best players for sure, and I think the rest of us, we followed him.
Yeah, it's been a very good tournament for Charlie McAvoy so far.
And that hit that he's referring to has just been making the rounds. Everybody's, reposting it from this area. I'm going through my friends' Instagram stories and Twitter, and everyone's just retweeting, reposting this big hit by Charlie McAvoy on Connor McDavid. If you haven't seen it yet, it's probably pretty easy to find, but it was a big defining moment of that game in the first period.
Yeah, and he had another big one on McDavid too that I think is has been and will be overshadowed because this is the one that's going viral, and this is the one where the U.S. scores later in the shift. So for that purpose, it is definitely the more important one. But he knocked McDavid down again, I think maybe even the same period, first period, or it might have been early second. But yeah, he had a couple of those, as I mentioned earlier. 5 hits, which would tie his season high with the Bruins this year. I think it's probably worth quickly touching on here in our last few minutes the other Bruins who are playing in this tournament. Jeremy Swayman obviously has not played. He is USA's third-string goalie, so Hellebuck has played every minute so far. We would think that even if the U.S. gives Hellebuck a break Monday night in a game that they don't need to win, it would be Jake Ottinger, not Jeremy Swayman. So my expectation is still that Swayman's not going to play. Brad Marchand and Elias Lindholm are both there. Marchand scored a big goal in Canada's first game. They're what ends up being an overtime win against Sweden. Marchand scored the second goal, finishing off a nice rush. he's playing lower in the lineup here. He's in a third or fourth line role on Saturday against the U.S. It was really a fourth line role. He finished with under 10 minutes of ice time. He's not there to be one of the leading scorers like he was on the 2016 World Cup of Hockey team. That was 9 years ago in his prime when he was playing on a line with Sidney Crosby and Patrice Bergeron. He is really the elder statesman of Team Canada now. And trying
he
to
score in the first game.
Yeah, and trying to carve out a role for himself, not just for this tournament, but to make the Olympics next year. Because Brad Marchand has never gone to the Olympics. The NHL skipped the 2 years that he would have been a lock, 2018 and 2022. So he's trying to carve out kind of an identity checking type role on this team.
And the comedian.
Yes, and the comedic relief, which we saw. If anyone saw the mic'd up segment of him walking into Canada's locker room after their win against Sweden, he's calling himself a fan. He's ribbing Sidney Crosby a little, saying he's making dangerous plays and he was almost offsides. So,
and I think it was Swayman that said, I'd fill water bottles just to be here. Like, that's kind of how it feels like for Marchand too. Like, I will go. Like, I will literally be the water boy. I need to go.
I think that was him, or he said something like very similar.
Yeah. So like wanting to be there, and I mean the way he's playing this year, he's certainly still up to that pace. The season he's having with the Bruins, and he did score, like I mentioned, in that first game against Sweden. We'll see, and he's obviously going to get a better reception in Boston than he did in Montreal with the booing. He's not going to get booed here. However, if you're a big Marchand fan, but you're from this area, you're rooting against him on Monday, or you're rooting against him every day that they're playing, and especially if it's U.S.-Canada in the final, which I am I am praying that's what we get. That's the ideal matchup for ratings and for everything. I think everyone that's buying those tickets is doing it with that in mind, U.S.-Canada.
Yeah, I think that Monday afternoon game, Canada-Finland, I think it's going to be a very pro-Canada crowd, actually, because I think that's a lot of Canadian fans making the trip down. Now, we'll see if the weather impacts that travel, but I had heard that that's where a lot of those tickets were going, were two Canada fans planning to make the trip to Boston for that game. Well,
yeah, I mean, Quebec it's from Montreal. We did this drive last year. It's only about 5 hours to get here. I mean, today, who knows? But
five and a half, 6, yeah.
Yeah, and
with snow, it's probably like 10.
Yeah, with snow, you might get here tomorrow, maybe right before puck drop. But yeah, I mean, maybe. But if they're only going to the championship game, like, they don't have to travel today, and hopefully it's better Wednesday. Who knows? But yeah, it's going to be awesome to see what the actual makeup of the crowd is, because I'm expecting there's going to be plenty of Canadians that are coming.
I have a question. Are they repainting the ice for this?
They already did. Yeah, they did.
Oh, wow. I didn't see that.
Yeah, they had a whole montage of it before the tournament even started. They changed the ice. They took off the Bruins logo. They put the Four Nations logo on there. So, yeah, it's going to look different. It's going to be a very different feel than we're used to at TD Garden.
Yeah, they started all that right after the Beanpot final on Monday. Like,
yeah,
there's a little behind the scenes. Like,
they had to bring up the Beanpot again.
There's actually like a rush to get media out of there because they were literally starting work to turn everything over right after, like that night. So Elias Lindholm on Sweden also playing a fourth line role. He's been their fourth line center. Obviously, he's not having the season in Boston that he would like. I'm sure when this tournament was announced, about a year ago, he probably had dreams of playing higher up in Sweden's lineup. But if you look at, just statistically, like among Swedish forwards in the NHL this season, he's 12th in scoring. So fourth line, that is what you would expect. And, I thought he played a good game against Canada. I mentioned this on the podcast, but as that game went on, he got some shifts against Canada's top six and was part of the effort to slow down guys like McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby, and give Sweden a chance to come back and ultimately force overtime in that game. I will fully admit I didn't get a chance to watch all of Sweden-Finland yesterday.
Yeah, me neither.
I had other stuff going on, so statistically it doesn't look like he did a whole lot. He was a -1, again, like 10 minutes of ice time.
I have a question for you before we go.
Okay.
Are you rooting for Canada tomorrow?
I don't know if I don't know how I'm going to feel sitting there watching it, but I want to see USA Canada on Thursday. So in that sense, yes, I am.
I'm rooting for Canada.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah, you have to. I want that matchup so bad. I'll root for them for now, rooting for both teams now, and then when they play again, rooting for USA. But kind of need Canada to win to get there. So